What do you think Joe Barry's plan is going to be against Brock Purdy? Purdy led the NFL this season in passer rating when pressured.
Mhm.
I don't know that the right plan is to blitz him and give him defined reads. I think you may want to play more like the Ravens played and see if you can. The Ravens did occasionally blitz him in the condensed formations off the edges,
Yeah.
but they also dropped a lot of guys into the middle of the field and tried to anticipate what windows Brock wanted to play, wanted to throw into, and tried to cloud those windows with as many bodies as possible. If you're Joe Barry, I mean, that's the wonderful thing about the NFL game and the playoffs is that there's always adjustments and there's always unexpected things. What do you think Joe Barry's plan will be? Will he try to blitz and speed up Brock? Will he rush 3 and drop 8? I talked to Colton McKivitz. I said, "What are you seeing on film with them?" And he's like, "Well, they'll rush 5 pretty consistently, but they won't blitz, so they'll drop other guys into the coverage, and you just don't know exactly who's coming of the 5." What do you think? What's the wrinkle? If you're Joe Barry, how do you defend this offense?
I think you look at all of the opponents that the Niners played this year, and you look at who they struggled against. Most recently, it was the Baltimore Ravens. And what did Baltimore do? Mike McDonald is running a defensive scheme right now that is all the craze at every level of football. Jesse Minter, the Michigan defensive coordinator, is also running that same defensive scheme. They were the top scoring defense in the country and the best overall defense in the country. And Mike McDonald was running that former Michigan defense now with the Ravens, and Baltimore has the number 1 defense in the NFL. And what do they do against San Francisco on Christmas night? A lot of zone coverage. And Brock Purdy really struggled because
And Joe Barry threw a ton of zone at Prescott last week
exactly.
and mixed the zones.
Yep. And that's what I was about to segue to, is that against Dallas last week, that offense is pretty vanilla and predictable at times. And I hated Dallas's game plan early where it was run, run, pass. So predictable. And then when they did pass, you knew that Dak Prescott was looking the way of CD Lamb. But what the Packers did was they played zone and they took the first read away from Dak Prescott. And when he got off that first read, he became unsure of himself. And then the pocket started to collapse. And then he wasn't really sure where to go with the football. And I thought that the game plan for the Packers was really good against Dallas in that way, where they gave them multiple looks within that zone and occasional blitz here and there, which I expect them to do to Brock Purdy as well. But kind of replicate that game plan from the Ravens: an occasional blitz. You bring 5, you drop everybody else back in coverage. You take away the middle area of the field, which the Packers have struggled to defend this year, and that's an advantage for the San Francisco 49ers. But then with that zone defense and those multiple looks, when you're dropping guys back in coverage, you make Brock Purdy think too much. You make Dak Prescott think too much, and they're not processing as fast. When Brock Purdy's processing fast off one read to the other, he's so good because his mind is able to work so quickly. But against the Ravens, that first interception that was intended for Deebo Samuel, he was late to get to Deebo. Then Kyle Hamilton crashed the route and he picked him off. And then after that, I think you saw Brock Purdy pressing a little bit because his vision was a little bit clouded and his mind was a little bit clouded with all those different looks. So I think that's what the Packers try to do. But here's the thing: they don't have the defensive personnel that the Baltimore Ravens have.
Yeah, no, that's true. They don't have Roquan and Queen in the middle of the field, and those guys are great, great players. I really think that the 28th run defense. It's a big day for CMC. It's a big day for Deebo in the backfield.
Yep.
I think it's a day where Kyle Shanahan's going to get both those guys isolated on Quay Walker, who I really believe is more of a defensive end, and Devondre Campbell, who's kind of lost more than a step. And I think those guys are going to get roasted either against the run or the shallow crossers trying to cover these linebackers or trying to cover these running backs, or in this case, Deebo as a running back. One of the things I want to get your thoughts on is that the empty set. One of the things that it was a great article. I think Kyle Posey had it on Niners Nation, that Brock's completion percentage was lower than usual at 63%. Not 70 again in empty sets, but his his yards per attempt were 11.2 yards per attempt. And he's going against a Packers defense that was the 8th worst in the NFL as yards allowed and yards per attempt against empty set. The Cowboys emptied the backfield in the third quarter and had a lot of success in that game last week, but they were already down 27-7 and the game was pretty much out of hand at that point. What do you think of that? I mean, basically speeding up the entire thing by, if they want to blitz Purdy at that point, and try to speed him up. It's high risk, high reward, but Purdy's attacking down the field in the empty set situations. That might be a major advantage for the 49ers if you look at the numbers.
Yeah, and that's another reason why I have confidence in this Niners offense going up against this Packers defense. If you do go empty, I think it's really important to have somebody flanked to the right of Colton McKivitz to try to help and chip there, because I think Colton McKivitz, obviously all year, he's been a massive weakness. 47 pressures given up, 9 sacks allowed, 4 hits, and 2 penalties. But if you do go empty, does Green Bay in the secondary, with the play designs, the creativity, the play calling of Kyle Shanahan, combined with the weapons that the Niners have with Debo and Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle and Jawan Jennings, who's back, who I think is going to play a big role in this game and always does on third downs as well as in the ground game, coming off that concussion. He's tough. He's physical. I think the Niners have missed that presence. Then I would challenge Green Bay to try to match me if we spread it out. But again, I think you have to have somebody there to the right of Colton McKivitz to try to help on that side. Because if you do empty it out, nobody's in the backfield, then you don't have that running back to help you instead. So whether it's a Charlie Warner, whether it's a George Kittle, just a little chip on that edge, because this Packers defense has guys who can get after the quarterback, and they're going to load up that Colton McKivitz side. Rashawn Gary, 9 sacks, Preston Smith, 8, Kenny Clark has 7.5. Devontae Wyatt has 5. And Carl Brooks on the interior, he has 4. So this is a good Packers defensive line. But in that secondary, I'll take the Niners' weapons over the Packers' secondary, especially that linebacking core in targeting the middle area of the field.
Yeah, Green Bay's got 3 players with at least 7.5 sacks. I mean, Smith, Clark, and Gary, but you also mentioned the other guys. There's also Lucas Van Ness.
Yep,
he's had 4. A sack in back-to-back games. So the Niner offensive line will be challenged. The best part of Green Bay's defense is clearly their defensive line. Okay, so I mean, and then I'm looking at some of the numbers. Green Bay, gave up a rating of 100.3 against wide receivers. That's 28th in the NFL. So I imagine Ayuk and Debo could have a lot of success. Green Bay allowed a rating of 105.8 quarterback rating when he was targeting the tight end this year. That's 23rd in the NFL. So Kittle could have absolutely a big day. So there's a lot of numbers and there's a lot of breakdown here. There's also 2 trends that I think are really interesting. Teams on short rest in the playoffs facing a team that's on regular rest, 5-12 straight up in the last 20 years. And then teams to win as 6-point underdogs, as Green Bay was last week, at least 6-point underdogs or higher the previous week in the playoffs over the last 20 years, and then go to the next round, this round, and they're 6-point dogs again the next week, are only 3-13 straight up over the last 20 years. Another angle that really favors the Niners.